Hi, everybody. It's Buzz. Before we get started, I would like to dedicate tonight's podcast to the memory of Grant Wall. Not a man I knew personally, but a guy who was a journalist of top integrity and a person of top integrity. And from all reports, a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I just wanted to dedicate this podcast to him.
Yeah. Woo. The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com, your source for all FC Dallas and World Cup gear. Shop the wide selection of U.S. national team merchandise. As of today, all Third Degree listeners can receive 25%. Wow, hey, 25% off. Nice bonus. All U.S. national team merchandise. Go get yourself some gear. And that includes the USA jerseys. 25% off with code Third Degree at Soccer90.com. Special just for you. Hello, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 190 of Third Degree, the podcast. Peter Welpton, our usual host, continues to be away with his heavy World Cup workload from the kick-around. So with me, as usual, is my English compatriot and FC Dallas writer on Third Degree, Dan Crooke. Dan, how are you doing today?
The World Cup was good while it lasted. It was weird how it finished a few days ago, and there's no more of it.
Yeah, it's basically over, is it?
Yeah, I don't know. It just got to the quarterfinals, and then it just disappeared.
I have to ask you, Dan, about that absolutely hysterical commercial or funny bit. I don't know what it actually is with Harry Kane and the guy from who used to play for Newcastle who won the World Rugby Cup. Have you seen the commercial or bit about kicking the ball over the goal?
I haven't, but that would be Johnny Wilkinson, one of the all-time greats. He's famously a set-piece guy. He actually he did a commercial with Adidas years ago with Beckham, and it was just them taking free kicks, using a rugby ball and a soccer ball, left foot, right foot, just from everywhere, and just it was ridiculous.
Well, the commercial or whatever it is, story time bit, funny comedy moment is him showing Kane that he's taking PKs wrong, that you're supposed to kick it, like a rugby style set piece. It's really funny to me. Yeah. And then at the end, Kane says to him something like, "That doesn't look right," and he says, "I won a World Cup doing that." And Kane's like, "Oh, okay." It's particularly funny given what happened.
Kane lost the World Cup doing that.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's funny. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I'm sorry to rub salt in the wound, but that bit was hysterical, particularly if it was done after the World Cup, and then it's even funnier.
Yeah, I see how it is now.
I mean, it's funny. You have to be lighthearted about it. I would have been happy for England to progress and win, although my bracket has Argentina, France in the final, so I feel pretty good about that.
Close down the one guy that's been doing something for France, and then a couple of ones pop up instead.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to Dallas-oriented content. And before we get into FC Dallas, Dan, I actually want to give a shout-out to a young female player from the Metroplex, Jaedyn Shaw, who has been nominated for Young Female Player of the Year from U.S. Soccer. I don't think that she'll win this time, but I wanted to give you a chance, Dan, to talk about this young lady who we on this podcast have been talking about for multiple years now, a phenomenal local young talent.
Yeah, actually, I didn't see the rest of the nominees, so I'm just going to quickly pull those up. But it'd be cool if Jaedyn won it as someone who started a journey with FC Dallas, given that Ricardo Pepi won the young male last year. So here we've got. There's so many categories this year. They've added all the beach players and everything. Okay, yeah. So we have CP, young male, that's female, young female. So, that's some tough competition. Alyssa Thompson's played national team. Olivia Moultrie, she signed with Portland when she was 13. Jaedyn Shaw has had a phenomenal year. NWSL had to change the rules to let her sign not go to college. Moultrie was signed as some like kind of weird hybrid, homegrown, after playing youth soccer for Portland Thorns. So it was like a total departure from that. Jaedyn was allowed to join NWSL as a 17-year-old. She's made. They've kind of went slow with her introduction. She joined mid-season. She's made 7 appearances, 6 of those were starts. Scored in each of her first 3 games. On the way to the NWSL semi-finals with San Diego. Sky's the limit. Such a big talent, and it'd be very cool to see her win it. And I was I mean she's going to be a national team player, a national team regular before long, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is a player we've been talking about since she was with FC Dallas. She did go
since
to
she was
Solar.
14. We've been talking about.
Yeah, and then she went to Solar after being with Dallas for a couple of years. Solar on the female side is immediately better than FC Dallas, so that's not a surprise on her part. She did get over a knee injury about a year and a half ago that she got over before she joined the pro ranks. But as you say, Dan, we've been seeing her dominating in the Dallas Cup and various other venues, and we've been expecting her to be a senior national team player sooner rather than later. And I imagine it might come in the next year or so. So, again, a player that's, as you say, sky's the limit on the talent.
I'm sorry, I meant 12, not 14. She made her debut for the FC Dallas WPSL, which is the second tier of soccer, women's soccer, I can't remember if she was a 12 or 13-year-old.
Yeah.
But I remember, her making that debut, going on to Solar, winning national championships, like you say. Just such a dominant, excellent player. Threat on either wing. And for sure, a part in Alex Morgan's 15-goal excellent season that she's had.
All right, now moving on to FC Dallas. The big news of the last week is that Marco Farfan has been extended by the club. That deal is one that we all have to, I would imagine, quite like, because it locks the player down for through what is likely the bulk of the prime of his career. It'll last until he's 28 if they pick up the option through the season 2026. I would assume, we don't know for sure, but I will assume that he'll get some kind of pay raise. I thought he was a little underpaid, it turned out, last year because of how much he played. So I would expect that number to have gone up some. Now, outside backs don't make $1 million, but they do, if they're starters, they do get into the territory of 300, maybe 400 at the most. So where that number lands will tell us a little bit more about how they value him. But where are you on this extension, Dan? Are you a fan of this move?
Oh, 100%. I mean, he was just a lights out, fantastic addition last year. Brought so much to the fullback positions in general. Defensively, I think his attacking game progressed through the season. Still a young guy who absolutely needs to be in the national team picture. I think he was still on. He had that weird contract situation, so I'm not sure. I think he was still on his initial deal, because he kept going through like a bunch of. I think it was like a 5-2 option or 5-1 option, something like that. But it's good to see that part cleared up as much as anything, because it seems really weird. Like, when is it up? When is he done? When does he move? Is he a homegrown? Is he cheap? What's going on? Very, very excited to see him tied down. And you had that really cool Excel of all the contracts, and it was good to see like a solid core of players now secured through 2025.
Yeah, they've talked about a cycle, and you can clearly see a cycle on paper with these current group of players. And we'll come back to some of that a little bit later. The key here with Farfan is, again, how much did you Did he get a raise because you don't want to eat up too much cap? And I think there's some concerns, and I'm a person that feels this way actually, that towards the end of the season, there was a little bit of a fall off. But for me, for my eyes, it was all just for the fact that he had to start every single game and go deep in every single game. And he was just getting banged around. And so one of the keys, I think, for Farfan going forward is going to be figuring out how to get that guy 5, 6, 10, if you count Open Cup games off during the season. So you see him playing more of a 26-game season, perhaps, rather than a 34-game season. A phenomenal player, but when you're talking about roster building, this is one of the concerns the club has, is who can come in, especially now that Munjoma's gone, because he was the guy that you could flip over there, and Nano you could flip over there, and Ima you can flip over there, but none of those guys are straight up left backs. They're all sort of emergency ideas, so much so that there was this massive load on Farfan. How do you get him legit spelled? And all eyes in this organization, of course, will turn to Isaiah Parker. How ready is he? And how ready he is will depend on how much time they can give Farfan off. And I think that's going to be really important going forward this season.
I think, a big thing to consider is it was really his first sort of quote unquote full season. He'd had 37 appearances in a few years for Portland. He did have 29 for LAFC. He's jumped to 34 in one season with FC Dallas. Let me count it. He was subbed off once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in total. In the 9 times if you go through the playoffs. Out of 34 games, he's he's turned into a guy who's just, and his minutes in LA, he wasn't really hitting 90s very often. We've talked a lot in the past about having to hit those kind of pains and go through them, and to be a 90-minute player, that's kind of where he's at right now. So I'm not 100% sure if it's if he needs to be like a actual 26 games and someone takes the other 8 a few regular season games, or he just needs to be every so often he needs to be pulled 20 minutes early and give Parker those last 20 or whoever else may progress in that area. In a world of 5 subs, that needs to be the case. He had 2,731 minutes last year, second most on the team to Martin Paz. Now, keepers, you don't sub, right? So he's playing deep into games, even when he is getting subbed. So that's going to be the key. Is like okay that he still played 32, 34 games, but reduce that minute number down to, say, where somebody like a Paxton Pomykal is at 2,400. That's 300 minutes less. I mean, that's roughly 3.5 games less, right, on your body. Matt Hedges was down at 2,200. You can play the same amount of games, just manage more the ability to bring somebody in. And that's part of the equation, because last year there really wasn't somebody that could spell him legitimately. We had guys that we saw come in there, that emergency-wise did it, but it was not the same as having a guy who you feel fits the profile. An important quality for this club. You remember when this coach came in, Nico Estevez, was a lot of this talk about guys that fit the system. It's not always necessarily like purely a pure talent signing. Sometimes the talent can be better or the same in 2 players. That doesn't mean one of them doesn't fit better. Yeah, I think his situation in getting spared those minutes as well. A lot of that came from the right back position. You had the tendency to switch Ima and Nani around. You had the times that Obrion would be brought in as kind of more of a right wing back, and even with 5 subs, you're not going to sub both your fullbacks. So it's kind of the times that he was brought off, quite often it was to do something like to bring Nanu on and kind of have them flipping around, or to bring like a Eddie Minjoma or someone on, just having a bit more stability at the right back position, with just Ima Tumasi, now that Nanu's left, following his loan, that again that may kind of help Farfan in his moments, because we did see a lot of cramping and tightness at times where you would want to have times where we see a Paxton Pomacole taken off and Nico's just like, oh, no, he was just a bit tight. It was just a precaution. That's, you want to protect all of your players like that, not just kind of leave Marco Farfan out because you don't know if Nanu's going to mess up or if Ima's going to get as far up the field as you want.
Yeah, you can look at the minutes played, and other than pause, of course, the top three guys are Farfan, Jesus Ferreira, and Jose Martinez. Three guys who I think you can arguably say don't have legitimate consideration of a guy challenging them or pushing them or being even in a position to be a full-time replacement. I mean, after that, you get into the area of Paul Arriola and Paxton Pomacole. Those, again, 300 or so minutes less than some of these other guys. A couple hundred minutes in Paul Arriola's case. But, again, really valuable players who don't have alternatives in their position that you would like. And that's a roster problem for the whole team. All right, now speaking of Ima Tuamasi and Nanu and right back, many, many times there are players from South America or Europe that are linked to FC Dallas, and we always jokingly say 1 in 8 or 1 in 10 might be real. And then sometimes you get a report that comes with a verification from a domestic reporter that we have absolute faith in. In this case, Tom Boggart confirmed that FC Dallas was in advanced talks for a player named Geovane Jesus, who plays for Cruzeiro in Serie B. Again, a Brazilian club. This is where Andres Zanata has relationships. Jesus or Giovanni probably is more likely. His playing sort of name is 21 years old. He's played for their first team 43 times. Nominally a right back. Has played some wingback, sort of midfieldish wingback, has played some right center back and a 3-man back line. The numbers that have been reported, not by Bogart, but some of the sources in South America, sound like probably $1 million buy. I find that slightly unlikely. I find that to be a little bit higher than I would expect for a player from Serie B. No offense to Serie B, but it's not the top tier in Brazil. But if there is a buy somewhere even close to that statute, that's why this player, if he were to come here, would more than likely be a U22 initiative, because the whole point of that process is to not promote, to incentivize MLS clubs to buy younger players, and with the idea there'll be less of a cap hit. If you want to think of them as sort of mini DPs, where what would ordinarily be a big cap hit is reduced significantly by using this mechanism. So depending on how one feels about Ima Tuamasi, this is a player that could replace him. It's a player that could be challenging him. It's a player that could come in and back him up for a season or two and progress forward, perhaps. Well, we'll see if that signing actually comes through, but it's a name to watch as we look for, domestic news of that acquiring that player actually happening. FC Dallas for sure needs a right back of some caliber, whether it's going to be one, we hope, that challenges Ima Tuamasi, because Ima will become better because of a challenge. That's how these things work. And it'll be interesting to watch how that goes. Dan, I am sitting here, however, watching the FC Dallas potential moves. Sebastian Ibiaga from LAFC, this potential right back, Geovane Jesus from Cruzeiro. These are defensive, perhaps depth pieces. We are not seeing, in my mind, the player of the caliber of, say, Aaron Long. Now, I've had conversations with people with FC Dallas of various levels that made me think that they were interested in Aaron Long or a player like that, a starting frontline caliber, big-time center back player. Now, if they miss out on Aaron Long, if they miss out on the New York City center back, Callens, are we looking at a team? And so far, we're hearing nothing in terms of an attacking player, although I don't see a lot of room there anyway, or a midfielder. There's not a lot of room there either. Are we looking at a season where Dallas basically is going to stand pat as we go through into the season? And other than getting rid of Matt Hedges, where is the attempts to upgrade this team?
Yeah. The Mavs did this thing for a few years where they put their cards, they threw all their eggs in one basket on like on a free agent, that free agent would inevitably go somewhere else, and then they would be left at the 11th hour like, well, shit, what do we do now? I kind of fear that maybe they're doing that with Matt Hedges. Just kind of hoping that there's some change there. It's weird to not hear a lot. I mean, things are going to go quiet with Christmas and the New Year, but there's normally a lot more shuffling around, it feels like, in late November, early December than there has been, other than signing Ibiaga, the link with Geovane Jesus, or Jesus, I guess, since it's Portuguese. It is a little bit concerning because, like we keep saying, we can't guarantee we can't guarantee Jose Martinez, and as you highlighted, put a lot more minutes than you would have liked on his body. While we're talking about Marco Farfan, it does kind of worry about that do nothing approach that you'd written about, rather than actively going out and getting better. The problem with that is, of course, everyone every season gets better. We've just seen Austin, make the change from Danny Hosen to Jesse Zardes, trying to improve their attack and get a little bit over the hump of like Maxi Arruti's pre and post July scoring record, and a little less dependency on Driussi. While FC Dallas, we're probably not going to see a ton of attacking moves made. You do want to see some improvement in the defence. Even if they were to keep on the Hedges, you want to see an improvement on one of the two centre-backs. You want to see some movement in and around the midfield, whether it's the 6 or one of the 8 positions. And we're just not seeing that yet, which is concerning.
Yeah, there definitely is a school of thought that this team could and will improve just by doing essentially nothing. Alan Velasco should improve. Jesus Ferreira is 22. Paxton Pomykal is 22. These are guys that should get better. Areola is still a prime of his career. Leggett will be here for a whole season, right? You would expect Edwin Cerrillo to improve again. He's taken a step forward every single year. He's improved. No reason to think that won't continue to be the case. At center back, though, Martinez played a big load last year, and there's no really left center back to back him up. Is letting Matt Hedges go away, is that an improvement, whether it's Sebastian Ibiaga or whether it's Stokosy Tafari? Or is either one of those guys an improvement on Matt Hedges? So you're looking at the same center backs coming back, relatively speaking, relative terms. Farfan's coming back the same. Even if this kid comes in at right back and lights it up, how much better is he than Imoto Amasi? Dramatically so. I don't see that happen with a 21-year-old. Is Paz going to reproduce that season he had last year? I don't know. Now, on the other hand, you're still sitting on 3.2 guaranteed money to Frank O'Hara. Now, some of that was paid up front. We've talked about that before. But nonetheless, that's the amount of money that's going out the door. And by the way, if you're expecting him to leave in the winter to one of those clubs in Brazil, you should go Google what the reactions are when they find out how much Frank O'Hara gets paid. The comic laughing was hysterical. You're going to have to wait till the summer to clear that number. You're sitting on $800K in Facundo. You still have Martinez, Pomykal, Leggett, Velasco, Areola, Jesus Ferreira. All those guys make over the DP line. You're going to buy down a bunch of them anyway. Now you're clearing Matt Hedges' money. Some of that went to Ibiaga, not anywhere close to the same amount, of course. You're clearing $600K from Nanu. So there is some room to do something. Again, once you're clearing some of that money at center back, you have this expectation of where's the next guy. But even if you bring in somebody to be of the equivalent level of Hedges or Martinez, unless you land a superstar center back, which likely might cost you $1 million or $2 million, that's not going to get significantly better when you already were one of the best teams in the league on defense anyway. So again, it just seems like we're sitting on a wait and see till some of these bigger other contracts can be gotten rid of. along your ideas of, can we get a 6? Well, we can if we buy out Facundo, because that's an $800,000 contract sitting there not playing if you bring in somebody at that position. If you wanted to go get Grezzo back, you'd have to move to the top of the allocation order to do that. That's going to be hard to do when Dallas was one of the better teams last year. You're going to be way down the order. So it's difficult, maybe, perhaps, for Dallas to do some of these things that we'd like them to do. Maybe that's part of why I talked about it being a process, because they know they need to clear some of these salaries before they can really do anything.
Entirely possible. It feels like Hara half a season, shouldn't really. Yeah, obviously the DP designation aside. And then wait and see. I guess wait and see. How that's even handled. What the remaining half a year actually comes down to, and if that's worth paying down to just in addition to have an additional DP spot. You do have to consider that the U22 initiative places, those are dependent on the use of your designated player spots as well, and the ages and types of players that you are using with those. FC Dallas is obviously very high on that, so you can imagine that the DP spots are going to, in some way, center around the use of maximizing the use of their U22 initiative slots. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, kind of what happens here. We know that Andre Zanata is pretty adept at getting players out of clubs and finding good value for them. Is this the time where he kind of has to flex those muscles and to bring anyone in? Yeah, well, I guess we'll wait and see. There are players. I mean, speaking of Aku, he's not the worst player on earth. We've heard minor interest in him. Not every league is as fast paced as and athletic as Major League Soccer. So somebody with his defensive acumen, and at 29 years old is still a decent prospect for some leagues. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. What happens with Hara, whether there is, it was only a couple of years ago that there was the situation of he had 6 months left on his deal. He wanted to come to Dallas. There was talks about how can you buy him out. Here's how much to buy him out. Signing pre-contracts. It's feasible that Dallas could be on the other end of that and say, okay, if we pay you this much, we'll mutually terminate. We can have our place back. You can go and do, whatever, as long as there's interest there in the first place.
Yeah, it's important to remind everybody that the window doesn't open until February. So, it's not the end of the world that you're not hearing anything yet. But, man, there's a lot of other teams out there making some noise, and with the U.S. being eliminated from the World Cup for a week now, I would have thought we would have seen some break on some of these contracts for center backs start to trickle out and things start to happen. But I think we're left in a holding pattern. We're kind of in a wait and see, and we'll have to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's always the notion of, especially the guys that have gone off to the World Cup for, whether it's for the US or for any nation. Or even players that were effectively on standby for early on and kind of cleared their schedule. Those guys are going to take a vacation. They're going to take some time with family, especially the ones who've obviously spent a month away from family. And some players are quite happy to do business in that time. Other players want to completely disconnect and then get back to it after the holidays.
Yeah, it's important to remind everybody, too, that FC Dallas, if they sign this Giovanni cat from Cruzeiro, that will be the last international spot. So something would have to give in terms of trading for a spot, getting a green card. I'm looking at you, Siki. Maybe trading away an international player, selling an international player, cutting an international player. You have to do something else to acquire somebody, so that limits you perhaps to a little more domestic action. Are there some guys in for example, USL Championship that might be useful pieces. Lots of questions remain out there. Okay. Sorry, go ahead. You were about to say something there?
I was just going to say, I like the name Giovanni Cat. That was cool.
Giovanni Cat. This Giovanni, a cat. All right, next thing is that people have asked me why, in particular, I say, and I don't know if you would agree with me or not, Dan, that Brandon Cervania and Seeking and Sebling are both linking eights. Why do I say that they're the same profile, not same profile, same job as Paxton Pomykal these days in the setup? And why do I think that's true? Why do I not say that one or the other of those guys, more likely Siki, is Sebastian Leget's backup? Why do I feel that there needs to be a player targeted specifically to be Leget's backup? And the short answer to that is assists. Siki and Brandon and Paxton all have really good progressive capabilities, progressive passing, passes into the final third, progressive receiving, although Siki's not as good at progressive receiving because his poorest aspect still is his game reading and positional sense. He doesn't, like Edwin, still learning to show for the ball. But Siki is really good at progressive dribbling. Brandon, more of a progressive passer, not a dribbler. Siki is pretty good at attacking forward. He's pretty good at distribution. But when you look at the assist numbers, it's not there yet from him. And this is what the knock on Paxton. This is part of why we say Paxton's a linking eight and not a free eight, which is the role Leget fills. Because as good as Paxton is getting forward into the box, as good as Siki can be in terms of dribbling and going at guys and going by him and making progressive passes, neither one of those guys put together boatloads of key passes that translate into actual assists and goals. This is the difference between Leget, who does put up numbers in those categories. So this is the kind of player we're talking about. The profile of a guy who backed up Leget would be a profile of a guy that used to be a 10. This is your Thomas Roberts. This is your, honestly, Alan Velasco can do it. They've put him in there. Guys that no longer are pure 10s because you have to have a two-way game these days, but they're the profile of guys that can make goals happen. And Siki does not have, Brandon definitely doesn't have that high ability and that zone 14 ability. Siki has a little bit of that in his bag, and I think perhaps over time he could become that guy. A couple more seasons perhaps, but he's not as young as you think he is. He's up on 24 already. So I think this is why they use Siki deep. So Dan, that's a rant for me, a soapbox rant for me on why those two players in my mind are Paxton's backup at the linking eight and not Leget at the free eight. If you had to play a guy for Leget right now, you would move Paxton over there and play one of those other two guys in his spot. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think for me it's almost like Siki is obviously a ball of energy. He's very much a rush it through. I feel like Brandon similarly, more of a passer and a dribbler, but kind of rushes through the motions a little bit on the ball, whereas Paxton maybe, although he plays a more advanced position, I feel like he's more of that steady, retain possession guy. He can obviously play with a little more urgency and everything, but I guess for me there's the term steady Eddie, the guy that you put him out there and he's going to retain possession, he's going to spread the ball around well, he's going to do what he needs to do. That's not necessarily, but that's the sort of thing I would associate more with Seb or Paxton. If I wanted a guy who was gonna, rush the ball forward, was gonna, rush the ball close, I guess, just be kind of intense on both sides of the ball. But you do risk losing possession, you do risk a few missed tackles, things like that. I would probably closer associate Siki and Brandon of the four.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they're very different players, Brandon and Siki. Brandon is smooth, he floats, he passes, he gets to the edge of the box but doesn't get into it. Siki's frenetic, high energy, makes a lot of recoveries in the sense of saving himself when he's out of position because of his energy. Some of Siki's samples are small because he has not started enough and doesn't play enough minutes to have like these larger, like 90-minute performances. Whereas Brandon, we've had long runs where he's been a key guy and started a lot of games in chunks and played really well in chunks and then falls off and doesn't play really well in chunks. So different players, but both do the same job. And it leads me to the question, Dan, since I think, and you, I think, agree that both of those guys are now basically backing up Paxton, is it time to trade one of those two players? Brandon is slightly younger, comes to the U.S. system, so he's domestic. Siki is not. Siki's international. One is more smooth and moves about. One is younger and is a little bit older, but more frenetic. Do you think either one of those guys, A, has value in the market, and B, should you move one to open up a little bit of logjam and maybe cap in that position?
I'm not sure either of them really have a whole lot of value in the market. Brandon's big commodity is being a domestic player, or big selling point. I think in terms of the organisation, Brandon's been here quite a while. Siki is kind of, he's still got that shine on him. They still tread around the little story of being sort of talked into drafting him, and then the coaches kind of being right with that one. I think if they were going to kind of, also I guess, Brandon obviously commands a higher salary, I want to say, without looking at him. I just feel like if they were to drop one, it would probably be to try and trade one away. It would more likely be Brandon at this point.
Yeah, the reason you would trade Siki would be to open up the international spot, or perhaps people were more interested in his energy off of the bench. Yeah, Brandon makes about twice as much money and is domestic. So there is some value, a little bit of value for both of them. I don't think high value for both of them, but there is some value. I think it would be easier to trade Brandon, I think, because of the domestic side. But I don't know that you can get a whole lot for either one of them. You'd be looking at probably about the equivalent of what it would take to get into the first round of a draft or something like that. A couple 150K, maybe 200K in Tam or Gam or something like that would be about the most you'd get for them, because neither one of them is a first-line player at this point. Both not spring chickens. They're, 23, 24. So it would be tough. But, when you have multiple guys at one spot, and if you're assuming Paxton's a lock to start, which he may or may not be, both of those guys fighting to be backup is not a great situation.
Yeah, I think, it probably doesn't help the cause a little bit that, Brandon, he has a US men's national team cap. He has the possibility of filing his change to play for Puerto Rico still. He is a guy that with a good run of games can do very well. He started out he started out well after coming back from Austria, but just kind of fell away. He had the pair of red cards. He's very much a peaks and valleys sort of player, whereas quite often you want to trade for someone who's maybe a little bit more consistent. Whether you bring them off the bench or you give them a good run of games, that you're going to get a similar quality, even a similar style of play that he doesn't have to kind of ease into the game. As I think we saw when when he has had good runs of decent runs in the team.
Yeah, I think it was maybe 2019 when he came back from the U20 World Championship, and he had that really nice run on the back end of the season, and he actually had like a spectacular goals added stat where he was like plus 19 or something, over that stretch run. But then he's never since then been able to put together more than a 10 or so game run of really quality play before he suffers something or just sort of loses his way. Never has become the lockdown player that we thought he would be. I mean, there was a point at which we assumed that he and Paxton would become the go-to eights on this team, and it doesn't seem to really be happening for Brandon for whatever reason. And Siki's putting pressure on that position, and having extra guys making $300,000 or $400,000 a year that aren't playing is not really what you want to do. So some roster management still be done with this team.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on then to the next topic, which is I would like to give a shout out to a couple of FC Dallas U17s who have been called into international camps. Nairobi Vargas has been called into the Honduras U17s, and Henry Canizales into the El Salvador U17s. Both these guys play for the FC Dallas U17s. That shouldn't surprise you. Henry Canizales is a left back. Nairobi Vargas is a very large, grown-ass man target striker. Both of them are a little inconsistent from time to time, but both have potential to be professionals, and shout-outs to them for their recent call-ups to those teams. Vargas has been in several camps for Honduras now. Canizales, I believe, has been called into, I think, a domestic sort of camp. It's down in El Salvador, but I think it's all U.S. kids that they've brought in for looks. I'm not 100% sure because there's not a ton of reporting on that particular youth system out there that I could find. But
so, funny enough, our good friend John Arnold is the one that actually wrote all about this. The El Salvador hunt for American-born players with of Salvadoran descent. I think in his get CONCACAF-inated emails and that he's covered that extensively in the process for both the men's and women's side. So you may not necessarily see Canizales reference there, but if you to kind of see what one of our CONCACAF neighbours are doing in that regard, you can definitely check that out.
Okay, any wild cards, Dan? Anything you want to throw into the pod today?
I've got nothing. No, I mean it's just been Luton getting back to playing. A little bit of disappointment there. England, a little bit of disappointment there, and no, it's been one of those weeks where I've barely been at home, so I haven't had a chance to see much of anything.
Well, I want to go back and touch on the idea of roster building, because I think this is an important phase we are currently with this organization. If we look real quickly, and if anyone wants to go look, I know I'll probably put a link in the description of the article I did a couple of days ago, which talks about this roster building as a structure, with positions and whether you're filling all the needs. And we started this winter with Jose Mulato coming in and filling the third striker spot on my list. The other next open spot I have is behind Leggett, which we just talked about extensively. Perhaps we could pencil in Siki there. If not, maybe there's a U22 out there or a homegrown or a draft pick or something. But sort of maybe that spot's full, but sort of maybe it's not. So there's a question mark. The next big spot is Isaiah Parker. Is he ready to come up and be that other left back in the 22? That's going to be a question that'll be answered in spring training. In my mind, Sebastian Ibiaga filled the Matt Hedges veteran depth piece at center back. Now, I always say you need 5 center backs, so that means you also need a 5th reserve, like a young draft pick or homegrown. But that leaves a big, massive hole where a TAM or free agent style center back would be. Again, we've talked about the perhaps potential interest in Long or other center backs. And really, that's it, except for perhaps maybe a little bit of draft pick on the bottom of the roster. So those are the spots. It's the big starting center back, or possibly maybe this U22 initiative. You assume that the other hole, which was right back, which possibly could have been Colin Smith, but now maybe is Geovane Jesus. So there's only one massive spot left. That's starting solid caliber center back. And then you can either pencil in Siki, or maybe you go out and get somebody young to back up Leggett. And that's really it, unless you're trying to figure out how to improve this team beyond just sitting still. That's where I see this build, and I don't see any other particular holes in it.
Yeah, it's we're good. I guess we are going to get to see the the first part in potentially filling some of those gaps where maybe you do want like a younger backup with the Super Draft coming up on Wednesday. Obviously, we know it's not the deepest pool ever, but if you can get another Siki or really, get some kind of depth out of it. A project for North Texas SC, that could ease some of the technical staff's work and kind of allow them to, I guess, focus on other targets.
Keep in mind that Dallas picks 24th in the first round, so unless you do something magical to move up, not a real chance, not a high percentage chance of value there, except remember, that's basically roughly the part of the draft where they landed Siki. So
yeah, they got him 28th.
Yeah, you can get a piece there if you do your homework. The percentages are much, much lower than you would think they would be in the top 6, yet the 2 top 6 picks, one of them they had last year is a complete washout. The other is, again, a pick for the future, drafted at 19 in the middle of his freshman year. So Isaiah Parker, no hurry, plenty of time there, other than like you'd like him to progress enough to start spelling Farfan more if you can. But again, more likely you're going to be getting guys that are going to help North Texas. The question will be, and I'll have something on this later this week or early next week, are there any homegrowns in this draft pool that are worth signing? The senior kind of homegrown, your Eddie Munjomas or your Khalil El Medkours, that kind of homegrown. There might be a couple interesting, but we'll see. And again, there's not a whole lot of pieces or room left for this thing in terms of holding your cards and kind of staying pat. Forget about even like, where's the big move to improve the team? I'm talking about just holding your spot, as the rest of the league probably tries to improve. And man, we're going to have a lot of bated breath held here in January as we wait for the team to do something, Dan.
I think I've found the scenario that we're looking for.
Okay.
So what's the fella's name? Mariano Fazio. His brother was the Argentine international, played for Roma.
Yeah.
Played for Richland College before going off to Tulsa.
Yep.
He was in the college showcase last week. So he comes up. He is your FC Dallas centre back of the future. How about that? I say that he's probably like 25.
He might be. I'm not exactly sure how old he is. He's a little bit older for sure. I have talked to some coaches about him, and the general.
He's 28.
Is he that old? Yeah. The general take I get on the guy is that he probably just is not quite fast enough of foot to be an MLS caliber player. If he is 28, as you say, that's for sure not a guy you will want to be drafting by any stretch. He cannot play for FC Dallas as a homegrown. You'd have to draft him. That'd be really old. I just don't personally see that as a viable option. Dallas has had him in camp. They have brought him into North Texas camp and a couple of times for decent runs of a week here or 2 weeks there, and they just haven't progressed forward with that. So in my opinion, that's not a viable option, but maybe they'll change their tune. Yeah,
just killing me. Just buzzkill all around.
I know, buzzkill all around. I will admit that most of those conversations happened in the previous coach's era. I have not talked to Nico Estevez about him. Perhaps he would fit the Nico Estevez profile. I think in particular, FC Dallas likes really good passing center backs in the current version of this team. So, Matt Bill wrote a thing where he tagged some USL center back, as a possible depth piece. I don't know. I think that if you can't get the front line center back that you want, the free agent or the South American or whatever, I honestly think you can just go with what you have other than adding a draft pick or a homegrown potentially and sort of see how it goes. And if you're worried about it in the middle of the summer, then you can do something different. I do think over the course of the next year or so, I think you need to replace Martinez because of the the leg issue and he's starting to age. It's not like his game is predicated on athleticism. It's more about game reading, but I just think that they could do better at both center back positions pending Nkosi Tafari progressing. I think Nkosi Tafari, if you invest the playing time, he's got potential to be really, really good. It's not a lock, though. It's a project. You got to wait for him and give him lots of time, and it's going to hurt from time to time.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is that's FC Dallas to a T. That's the same case with Parker.
Yep.
A guy who's got a great upside, but you need to invest to get there. You can't just kind of let him sit on the bench or, play park football and hope that it just magically happens.
Yeah, Colin Smith and Isaiah Parker are in the same boat right now in the sense that they're both 19-ish, and they both are now, in my opinion, outplaying North Texas Soccer Club in the level that it's at. Yet neither one appears to be ready for MLS action. Smith certainly not if they're going after a guy from Brazil. Parker, in my opinion, probably is closer, but we're going to find out. Both of those guys now are firmly in the gap that exists between North Texas Soccer Club and FC Dallas. Both of those guys, if Smith for sure, and Parker, if he can't force his way into the 22, need to go on loan to the USL Championship. Both those guys need to play 30 games next year. Both of them need to play at a level better than MLS Next Pro. This remains an organizational issue, this gap between North Texas Soccer Club and FC Dallas. They're going to bridge it with Bernie, with Bernard Kamungo, because he already popped up and then in 20 minutes of play showed that he's right there ready to be the second left wing after Velasco, or right wing if he prefers, ahead of Obrian. So it can be jumped, but Kamungo is a guy further along his progression, a little bit older. Those other two dudes are 19 and need to play somewhere, and somewhere better than North Texas.
Yeah, I mean, the league all round us has got an issue there.
Yeah, it's definitely not good enough yet. And the funny thing is that there are some clubs that use it basically just for their U19 team, and they get absolutely wrecked game after game after game.
I found it interesting. I was looking up last week with the UPSL final. I was looking up like the where it was going to be played and everything. And UPSL, a lot of, particularly on the West Coast, a lot of teams are using that as a second academy game. So I guess, just kind of varying up, having kids playing against adults in that, because, well, they sure as hell aren't doing it in MLS Pro Next.
Yeah, and even
MLS Pro rather than MLS Pro Next.
Yeah, the U19 bracket for a lot of MLS clubs isn't good enough because some clubs just flat out close down their U19s. Like, for example, Houston doesn't have a U19 team. They jump from the 17 straight to Next Pro. And, they keep 4 or 5 dudes, and the other 20 got to go find a new place to play at the U19 level. And then I think it's LAFC has their U19 team in UPSL, as you mentioned, as an example. So in the FC Dallas case, because there's not enough clubs close enough of that caliber like there are in California, they tend to scrimmage a lot of games outside of their regular schedule. They play their own U17 team fairly frequently. They play some of the UPSL teams. They've played DKSC. They've played 40360. They scrimmage, the 19 scrimmage against North Texas all the time. So, Dallas tries to fill some of those gaps as well. Everyone's trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, it's a big problem because, what USL at least allowed you to do is USL 1, you had that mix of young players and then like 30-somethings looking for the last leg of their career. And those are the guys that you need, your young guys, to play against.
Yes.
You need to, you sent Jesus and Brandon to Tulsa in USL Championship so they could get an elbow in the face or two from an aging vet, and that's what kind of helped them get over the hump and break into the first team, in the first place.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Smith and Parker both need, is to go up against teams like that. It's to go to, and you can't send them to San Antonio. They're the defending champs. They just won the title. You got to have to find some teams that are probably near the bottom of the standings that looking for young potential to play and try and elevate them. Maybe Tulsa's looking to progress forward. Maybe, I don't know where El Paso is, but I feel like it's sort of in the middle. ground, or maybe you got to reach further afield to get these guys some minutes. This is going to be a test of the relationships.
It was always interesting. Sir Alex Ferguson, his attitude towards loan players, goalkeepers and defenders would always go to a struggling team because they're going to see way more attention.
Yeah.
Attackers would go to a decent team because they're going to see more attention. They're going to get more chances created. It was very like a methodical thing. So like you say, while you're not going to see the defensive side, which I think is by far and away both of their weaker points. I've seen them play much better as wingers than fullbacks for North Texas. Grant, I haven't seen a ton of them for North Texas. Someone like San Antonio, who you would hope are kind of running up scores in some games, that's not going to do anything for them.
No. If
they can get in the team, that is.
Yeah, you would struggle to break into a team at San Antonio. That's a really good
and we saw it with Timasi when he was sent to
Bold.
Austin Bold as a right back, and they were just like, sorry, we don't have the use for a right back. He's playing right wing, or he can just come back and go into training.
Yeah, and Nicky Hernandez at San Antonio last year had trouble getting more. I think he had about 10 starts, and did some good things with the minutes he got, but you would like to have seen more. I do think that there were some guys on this team last year that Dallas wanted to go on loan, and they turned it down and chose to stay here and try and fight for a spot. I think that's almost always the wrong decision. When you're between the ages of 18 and 24, playing is everything. You got to be play. And so when an opportunity comes along, if the Dallas arranges for it for these guys, you got to take it.
I mean, weren't a few of those players declined options?
Yes, they were.
At the end of it? I mean, that's
your
takeaway.
Yeah, so was Nicky too, but I still think Nicky has done himself a service because he put himself in the shop window with
absolutely
the USL Championships, and there will be teams that will say, I liked what I saw there. I liked the numbers he put up. Whereas looking at Eddie Monjoma or Nicky Hernandez both went and played for DKSC and the UPSL in order to try and in the playoffs, in order to try and, I guess, get some action and show that they can play or whatever. So sometimes putting their resume together is as important as anything else for these guys in their progression.
Yeah, I think Nicky Hernandez, I think he's made himself a very good, not quite MLS level resume. He's played for Texas United in USL 2. He's played for Denton Diablos. He's been a mainstay for North Texas. He's a USL champion with San Antonio FC on loan. He's put himself in a very strong position for someone to say 24-year-old midfielder. Like you said with Edwin earlier, he's kind of improved year on year. He had one stumble in his second season in that 2021 season with North Texas, but largely he's been a pretty and played for SMU obviously for a couple of years. He's been someone who's shown progression almost every year.
All right, the one last topic I just want to put out there for everybody is to keep in the back of your mind that Dante Seeley and Justin Shea, both of those players have their loans run out in June of this season. So I don't think it's super likely either player could come back, but both of those clubs, both of those loan deals, I believe, had options to buy in them that have not been executed. It does make me wonder whether the two teams they're with now have interest in keeping them beyond the end of their loan. That is when their season's end, is in June. No agent likes to bring their player back to Major League Soccer at the end of a loan like that. They kind of don't want that. I wouldn't call it a failure, but they don't want that slight vibe of a failure coming back like that. They prefer to find another landing spot in Europe. But nonetheless, it's possible that Dallas might keep a spot open, perhaps, or be ready to loan somebody out and bring them in if it works out. It's just something to have in the back of your head. there's several things happening all at once for the summer, middle of summer. Franco Jara's gone, maybe some loans ending for players that could come back. So the summer will be interesting for FC Dallas. You're opening a DP spot and $3 million of internal budget and a DP roster hit. There's going to be some action this summer for FC Dallas.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if either of those players come back. We just see a bit of noise about, maybe being too good for MLS, then going and playing significantly lower level. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Che, because, he does have he is with a strong agency, CAA. He is a guy that has a boot deal. He's, been playing a lot of midfield, apparently. He's, someone that he's constantly talked about he's talked about a lot for 2026. He's one of those guys whose profile maybe doesn't match his play.
Yeah.
To a degree, and that's not a slight on him or anything. That's just saying that he's kind of set up for success beyond where his career on the field is right now. I feel like there's probably not a great chance of him coming back in that scenario. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Sealy. Obviously, a long term, probably a longer term association with FC Dallas due to his dad. Sometimes, I think we've talked about it on the Discord about, with Giovanni Reina and Claudio Reina, that, sometimes parents who are pros just want to kind of stay out of it and let their kid just do their thing because they themselves would have had pushy parents or something else. So is there a notion that maybe there would be less pushback there to maybe coming back to FC Dallas and earning your stripes? Alternatively, we've talked a lot about him having a Trinidad and Tobago passport as well, and what that can kind of open up in Europe through different visa situations in different countries.
Yeah, the interesting one for me is actually more likely to be Dante Sealy, because I feel like the Giovanni signing essentially is what Che would be in terms of your roster.
Yeah.
Right backish, center backish kind of vibe. But Dante Sealy plays the same position as, for example, Jaedyn Shaw, whose guaranteed money runs out at the end of 2023. He has two options for 24 and 25. But if you're looking at perhaps Dante Sealy coming back, and maybe that's a way where he comes back in the summer, and then there's a 5-month window, like, okay, can you be a replacement at that spot? Do we let him slide out and you become that second line guy behind Paul Arriola? Because Dante Sealy has got a very different profile from Paul Arriola. Dante Sealy has a profile more similar to Jaedyn Shaw, that direct running at people with pace, dribbling, attacking, slashing kind of vibe. Just sort of a way things fit together wise, that sort of slides in place for me. Now, on the other hand, I don't know how Nico Estevez is going to feel about Dante Sealy in terms of his training methodology. Dante, in my experience of watching him train when he was here in the academy, is not a crush it every day in training warrior like this coach seems to like. But again, that was 3 years ago. He's been gone for a while. So maybe if he doesn't find that he succeeded, quote unquote, with PSV, maybe come back and put yourself in the shop window is the next move for Dante. And maybe that fits in with what the club might be looking towards 2024. Now, that's a lot of mights and maybes, but that feels more likely to me than Justin Che does.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about coming back and putting yourself in the shop window, coming back and, it's almost turned into an exclusivity. It really shouldn't be, and this will be a part of the next coaching cycle, I'm sure, but the Gold Cup now is largely an MLS player tournament. It's not so much the guys on the fringes of the team or guys that need tournament experience as much as just, well, you're there, so we'll use you. If a Sealy or or in a more extreme case, a Che could get into that is more exposure. That is more incentive to buy a national team player than a kid who's played a bit part of reserve football.
Yeah, Jaedyn Shaw turned 20 in November. Dante Sealy turns 20 in April of next year. So again, guys with long futures ahead of them, but something to have on your radar going forward. All right, Dan, that got us to about an hour's worth of content. Thank you, my friend, for being here. Hopefully, despite England's loss, you enjoyed the World Cup, and hopefully you're having a good holiday season.
So far so good. And likewise, hope you're enjoying it and have a good holiday season. And it's that wonderful time of year that we're having a lot of. We mentioned the Discord a second ago. Definitely everyone should, even on the off season, do the whole Patreon thing, get in that Discord, have a lot of fun discussion, a lot of good quality soccer talk in there, and you're getting some good bands going right now with some thoughts on some of the younger guys. You had the Vargas and Canizales a few days ago. It's some good content considering where we were at in the off season.
Wow, thank you. I quieted down a little bit during the World Cup because it was an overload of soccer in the world. But now that we're cooling down a little bit on the amount of soccer, we'll start to ramp up a little FC Dallas, which brings us to hopefully there's some news soon because we need some more things to talk about with FC Dallas. Everybody, Third Degree, the podcast is brought to you by soccer90.com, your source for all your FC Dallas and World Cup gear. Shop the wide selection of national team merchandise today. 25% off as a Third Degree listener with code Third Degree at checkout, soccer90.com. That's a special 25% off for all listeners of this podcast and supporters of Third Degree. 25% off. Go get it. Soccer90.com. And thank you to all of you Third Degree curious fans, FC Dallas curious fans. I got to say that right for Peter out there. Hopefully you guys are having a great holiday season. And we'll see you next week on the next edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Yay, content.
Woo! Woo! The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree Net Podcast. 25 long hard years, yeah. Was Carrick, yeah, the man. 25 years, you better be giving this man at least $5 a month, Patreon Third Degree. Come on, pay the man. It's the only comprehensive coverage of my fucking club that I love so much. Hey, come on, it's Third Degree or bust. Yes, give the man some money.